A shocking turn in Nightwing is such a great idea. I can't believe that it hasn't been done already. I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Welcome to Essential Issues Weekly, where I talk about DC Comics 1 week after their release on the Ultra tier of the DC Universe Infinite subscription service. In each installment, I pick an assortment of comics to talk about as a DC fan and also explore what, if anything, they have to say about the essential issues of real life. Now, warning, full spoilers for everything I talk about. This is your first and only warning that many spoilers lie ahead. Right now, we're taking a look at comics originally released to the Ultra tier on August 14th, 2024, and originally published July 17th, 2024. Briefly, I'll just say about Wonder Woman number 11, as much as I have been enjoying Tom King's run on Wonder Woman, this one was off the beaten path of what I like Wonder Woman for. It's a tie-in to Absolute Power, and because of that, it's got all these other magical characters kind of thrown into the story and given a lot of extra screen time, if you will, including Madame Xanadu, who I was like, she's being written in kind of a weird way that I'm not used to her being written. And the Spectre, I'll get to him I think in a second. Two of the Shazam kids, and John Constantine. And so, yeah, it's just like taking time away from Wonder Woman. The story also felt just a little bit on the whimsical side, especially at the front, given like the really devastating stuff going on, perpetrated by Amanda Waller and her Amazo androids in the Absolute Power crossover. So I just wasn't feeling this, and on top of that, there's the backup story that's still about Wonder Woman's future daughter kind of being babysat by Damian Wayne and Superboy, John Kent. And yeah, I'm just like, where is this story going? Why are we taking up precious pages each month with this story that is also very whimsical and stuff? And I really want the stuff I know Tom King for more, which is serious, fairly kind of weighty stories. And so I'm just not into that. This is just like all the things that I put up with but don't really like about this current run instead of the things that I really come to it for. So one of the things that kind of lightens this up in a way I don't enjoy is that all these characters in hiding from Amanda Waller, understandably so in some ways I think, are playing a game of poker. And Jim Corrigan, now I haven't been able to really track down the story that explains why Jim Corrigan is alive again, because in the John Ostrander, Tom Mandrake run, Jim Corrigan did finally pass on to heaven or whatever. And since then, it's been other characters that have had the mantle of the Spectre, and I think even when it did get passed back to quote-unquote Jim Corrigan, that maybe there was a question of whether or not it was the original one from the 40s or a new one. And so I'm not familiar with this Jim Corrigan enough to really be critical of how he's being written here, but it certainly does not at all seem like the Jim Corrigan from the John Ostrander, Tom Mandrake run, which I think is pretty strongly, arguably, the most respected run and the most successful run of the character in comics. And so he was a rough, very flawed guy, and he is just coming across as very whimsical here, maybe even a little, I don't know, self-righteous or something. He says, about bluffing in the middle of this game, that like, are you going to trust me? Are you going to trust John Constantine, bosom friend of demons, shades, and horrors, or are you going to trust me, servant to the heavenly host above? And he's the dialogue here sounds like a pretentious Christian. That thankfully I don't know many of those, and I can't think of a single one at my church. But I know they're certainly out there, and this certainly sounds like one. And I'm like, Jim Corrigan, he was never like he just was never like this in the way that he was written. So this is very weird, and I think it's being played for jokes, but at the sacrifice of the Jim Corrigan character that I think of. The other characters are just like, well, we're going to trust John, most definitely going to trust Jonathan, and then Madame Xanadu says, go fish, which she's being written as though she's not even familiar with the game of poker. And I'm like, what? So yeah, I'm just confused about some of the writing choices here. There's also some question about like Spectre here, like he, in response to an Amazo android kind of storming the scene, he says, I hear the cry for revenge and I must respond. No, the Spectre has never been, that I remember, about revenge. He has been about the wrath of either God or the wrath of the unavenged dead. And avenging is different from revenge. Yes, there's some overlap and kind of a blurry line there, but still, this just seems a little off center from what I've known the Spectre to be. And of course, he was written definitely off center in the pages of Alan Scott Green Lantern not long ago as well. So it seems like the Spectre is a little bit adrift right now, and there's not a clear vision for how this character should be written, what his personality is, and like what he's all about, what is really driving the Spectre. And I felt like that was made very clear in the Ostrander Mandrake run. And since then, it's been, changed and kind of changed with whoever the host is, whoever's writing him. But if we're going to go back to Jim Corrigan, I wish that there would at least be a little bit more convincingly tribute being paid or honoring of how he was written before. That was a long-running series, and it would have been nice to feel like this writer, like that Tom King, had read that run and was kind of keeping some things consistent here. But again, I have had trouble tracking down, okay, where exactly did this new Jim Corrigan pop up? So I probably need to do some Wikipedia searching. Maybe they're being consistent to a way he's been revamped when he came back on the scene, but it feels off to me. Another example of that is when Mary Marvel, in the thick of combat, says God, just like as like a swear or something like that, and the Spectre over her shoulder says, Mary, please, no need to take the Lord's name in vain, not when he is so eager to provide you with his justice. And that whole idea of like the Spectre, saying, oh, please don't take the Lord's name in vain, let's not do that. That is like, I have no reason to think that Mary Marvel is a professing Christian. And the Apostle Paul said, what have I to do with judging outsiders? He was not about morally policing people outside of the church, And so the Spectre having this moment, it sounds like someone that maybe Tom King thinks of the Spectre as like, his really conservative grandmother who would have concerns about these particular pet sins or whatever, that is a thing. That is a thing in some branches and sectors of Christian culture, unfortunately, to have little pet sins and to be policing people that are not Christians. But I mean, that's not biblical. And whether it's, whether you are concerned about the idea of it being adhering to biblical teaching or not, which I think there's an argument to be made there, because clearly the Spectre is based at least on Old Testament writings and arguably on New Testament writings as well, but very much in that Judeo-Christian realm is where the idea for him and justice and vengeance and all that kind of stuff was coming from, was those biblical concepts. But I mean, like, for It's just weird that he would kind of, it feels very petty for him in this moment to say, let's not take the Lord's name in vain, and I'm like, it feels again like a moment that's played a little bit for humor at the cost of a consistent character and motive for the Spectre. Then we also have, just speaking of like inconsistency with biblical source material, Mary Marvel, going up against this Amazo android, says that, I used to have the wisdom of Solomon ticking around inside my brain, and times have changed, but some of those lessons stick with you. And let me tell you something about Solomon. He understood a fundamental truth. When you're confronted with a tough problem, it's best to just rip that bleep in half. And of course, they use the comic book squiggly, so we don't really know what she said there. But I'm just like, is this a joke that's saying that Mary really didn't remember accurately Solomon's approach to problem solving, or is this her just kind of crazy youthful reinterpretation of it, or is this in some way actually in the writer's mind an actual representation of the wisdom of Solomon, which would be most clearly portrayed in the Tanakh or the Old Testament, in books like Proverbs and arguably Ecclesiastes and stuff. And so I don't know, it's just kind of weird. I've got little nits to pick, because both of these concepts, the wisdom of Solomon and the Spectre, have their roots in Judeo-Christian scripture. And so it would be just really cool if more writers that were using these characters would tap into that source material a little bit more, even if they're just viewing it as literature and mythology. I mean, Greek gods coexist in this world, so I mean, they can approach the God of the Bible the same way if they want, but at least go back to the source material and draw a little bit more from there, as practicing Jews and Christians would see those things. So anyway, then we've got Superman number 16, another Absolute Power tie-in, and this picks up right after he was shot, and he's having surgery performed on him by Mr. Terrific and Dr. Midnight in critical condition. He does get out of that a little faster than I would like, put in the black suit to kind of regenerate, even though his Kryptonian ability to regenerate with the sun is gone. They're just kind of hoping for the best at this point. So I would have liked to have seen him like in the hospital bed for like this whole issue instead of getting out at any point. But it still does, it still does give some weight to the fact that he was shot. So I appreciate that. But one of the things that I really did love about this issue is a flashback at the beginning with Ma and Pa Kent sitting down in the living room to watch a magic show that little Clark has been so excited to put together using sheets they found at a swap meet for curtains, and he got some little book on magic tricks and stuff like that. He's so excited about it. And I mean, like, as a dad, I totally get this. And it's really endearing, it's not just a sweet moment because, I'm a dad and I have boys too and blah, blah, blah. But it reminds us as readers of the really wonderful, loving home that Clark was raised in and how that shaped his character. I think that is so valuable and such a good reminder. And the way it's written, I feel like comes from a place of knowledge and experience, maybe even, because the parents are just kind of like, they're not excited about sitting down, especially Jonathan. He's like, oh my gosh, why couldn't it be sports? And Martha's like, he'll be interested in sports too. Let's just sit down and do this, and it's like, it's the dynamic there of like how the parents are feeling about this. It's like, it's a little bit of a pain and trying Jonathan's patience to sit down, but at the same time, they love him, they adore him, they want to encourage him and just enjoy him and him being excited about something. It's very sweet. It captures the flavor of this kind of scene in a home very well, I think. So then a little bit later, we've got all these heroes kind of that have escaped Amanda Waller's clutches, gathering in the Fortress of Solitude, trying to stay off of the radar, and they're trying to like gather, the sense of like, what are our losses at this point? And Superman asks Mercy, Lex Luthor's kind of like bodyguard and number one or whatever, who's been working for him because of the whole Supercorp storyline. He asks her like, where's my son? Where's Connor and where's John? And she says, I couldn't save them. I tried to get all of you, but the Amazo was too much and I had to make a call. I saved you. And she starts to get tender here and says, I'm really sorry, boss. And then she just falls into his welcoming arms, and he just comforts her in this moment, saying, it's okay. I know you did your best. Thank you, Mercy. I have no idea why I got the feels in this moment, but I found this such a touching moment. Maybe because Mercy, I feel like she's been pretty much a one-note stoic character as the bodyguard, sidekick, whatever, for Lex Luthor. Maybe it's because I just love the idea of her softening under different leadership, since she's been working for Superman now while Lex Luthor has been in prison. And she even references in a few panels after this the fact that, that she's just been around him so much that she thinks she's kind of softening up. And I just love the idea that Superman's character, his virtue, his gentleness and compassion would be breaking down barriers in the character of Mercy and showing us another side of her. So, I still can't quite put my finger on why it caught me the way it did, maybe partly because it was surprising, but I really appreciated this moment. Anyway, they start cooking up a plan of Zatanna's to use these kind of like back roads of the magical realm as kind of like an underground railroad to find heroes, vigilantes, superpowered people, and evacuate them and kind of gather their forces. So that's kind of like the setup for where this storyline is going. And then the last page has Lois showing up in what seems to be Luther Corp, probably, maybe, designed uh, armor of like, but it's got the Superman symbol on it too. So I don't know how much of that is Kryptonian or what, but it's just, I think it's just fun. I think probably we're going to see more of this kind of reversals going on where the people that normally have superpowers have been depowered. And so who's going to rise up? Who's going to get clever? Who's going to find, some superpowers of their own during this vacuum? And so I should have seen a moment like this coming, but I didn't. It was still a nice surprise. Hopefully they'll do something interesting with it. Speaking of nice surprises that I hope they do something interesting with, the award goes to Nightwing number 116. Because of the final page, but I'll get to that in a second. In this issue, Nightwing is recovering in the hospital after Heartless really takes him out hard, and now he's being blamed for all of Heartless's crimes, and so he realizes he's got to get back to his old self in order to solve this problem. His old self meaning, if you've forgotten, his self that is not afraid of heights. Heartless poisoned him a number of issues back, and the effects of that poison have left him fearful of heights. And of course, Nightwing, acrobat extraordinaire in the DC universe, him being afraid of heights means he's largely dysfunctional. I mean, he can be down on the literal street level, but anything above that, and he's really running into problems. And so he realizes, okay, enough is enough. I can't keep functioning or trying to function like this. I've got to go fix this problem I'm having and come back. And I looked at the cover and I saw Boston Brand, Dead Man, on there, and it should have been a big tip-off, but I think between looking at the cover and opening up the comic, I got interrupted, taken away, came back, forgot all about the cover again, and so when the reveal moment of Boston Brand came, it was a surprise to me and a really delightful one. So then we got this flashback scene that goes back to when Dick Grayson originally had fears of heights from a fall that he had, and in that scene we see the way he dealt with it was some trapeze guy came and had some renown for being able to coach other trapeze artists and stuff, and was willing to help Dick out, but kind of covertly, not wanting his parents to know for some reason. Well, then when he introduces himself finally, we find out this is Boston Brand. And like, I'd forgotten about the cover, so I was like, oh my gosh, that is perfect to have that kind of connection between Deadman and Nightwing. I feel like there's been some kind of a connection established with them before, but I don't remember if it was specific and as tight as this one. Still, it was really cool. So that's what Nightwing is off doing. He's on this quest to climb up the mountains of the Himalayas or whatever and go to Nanda Parbat, which is this mythical city that Deadman is now kind of like stuck in because of some previous events in another crossover in the past. So while he is off doing that, Bloodhaven, his city, is without Nightwing, its premier superhero, and the Titans have also been convinced to leave because of all these hostages whose parents, all these children have been kidnapped, and their parents are going to be killed like every day or every hour for as long as the Titans remain in the city. Although Nightwing has been invited by Heartless to remain. And so he's itching for a final confrontation or something, but he's like, Titans need to go. And so they have to leave very publicly in order to save the parents of those kidnapped kids. But Nightwing is also off figuring out how to not be afraid of heights again. And so Bloodhaven is in big trouble. And that's where this awesome turn happens at the end of the issue. Barbara is on a rooftop with Batman, and she says, "You're sure about this course of action, Bruce?" He says, "I'm sure." And she says, "Thank you." He said, "Dick would do the same for me. He has done the same for me." And I'm like, what has Dick done for him that he's about to do for Dick? And then in the next panel, we see Batman's costume pieces start falling to the ground, and he says, "Bloodhaven has lost too much." I'm like, oh my gosh, he's changing his costume. Oh my gosh. Then the next panel, it says, it needs its hero. And he's holding up the Nightwing costume to his chest. And in the last panel, he's got the Nightwing costume on. He says, Bloodhaven needs Nightwing. And he's even got like that Batman scruff that's not shaven off. And so it's just like, it unmistakably retains the vibe of Batman. And he's wearing the Nightwing costume with one foot up on the ledge, standing proudly, not really a Batman stance, this very kind of open, exposed kind of heroic pose that would be more a Nightwing kind of pose, but still with a kind of somewhat blocky mountain of a man kind of look, rather than like an agile, acrobatic hero type of look. And then it just says to be continued. And I'm like, I cannot wait to see what they're going to do with this. Because, of course, longtime comic book fans would know that on one main occasion, and on a couple others since, Dick Grayson took up the mantle of Batman while Batman was just totally off the map. And I can't believe I had never considered this as a novelty, that Bruce Wayne would ever have a reason to become Nightwing while Dick Grayson is off the map. But I love this, and I'll tell you why I love it. Because in the times where Dick Grayson has been Batman, he's had to sort of try and act like Batman, even though he doesn't have the same kind of dark, tragic hero vibe in him. Well, he has the tragic hero vibe, but he is not hardened and dysfunctional the way Batman is, the way Bruce Wayne is. And so he would surprise people like Commissioner Gordon or others who didn't know what was going on with suddenly him behaving just a little bit more friendly, a little more lightheartedly, and they'd be a little bit confused. And I cannot wait to see how people are going to react to this version of Nightwing, who you better believe, I mean, I'm certainly believing, I think it would be a totally missed opportunity if this isn't the case, but you better believe he's going to have a harder, darker edge to him. I just can't wait to see what happens to kind of like the name of Nightwing, and like how awesome Bruce Wayne is going to. I mean, not that Dick Grayson isn't awesome, but like awesome in a totally different, darker way. I just can't wait to see this version of Nightwing for however long it lasts. It's probably only going to be for a few issues, which is a real shame, because when Dick Grayson has taken over as Batman, it's gone for like 6 months or a year of publishing time. And this story arc, I think we're maybe 2 or 3 issues into a 5-issue story arc. So I don't think this is going to be the beginning of like 6 months of Bruce Wayne as Batman, but I would love that. I would be fascinated by that. And when this reveal happened, I laughed out loud in delight. And I cannot remember the last time a comic book both surprised me in such a delightful way and just conceptually delighted me in such a way as this turn of events. And yeah, I mean, that's why, as for my ring selection this week, I chose the white ring. I can't remember if I've worn the white ring as my selection before. I think its ties to an emotion are really kind of weak, in the same way that like the black ring, well, that's death, and the white ring is life. These aren't really emotions, but man, my idea in picking the white ring is that just I feel freaking alive. This is like exactly the kind of stuff that makes me so glad to be a comic book fan. You're not going to see this in comic book movies. You might see it in a comic book TV series, but not in movies, when there's only so many stories with these actors playing these roles that they can pump out. They're not going to divert off the core path for a whole movie and give you Bruce Wayne as Nightwing if there was a Nightwing trilogy. But they can do that in comics because there's fresh new stories coming out every week with this long-standing continuity to draw from and take ideas from and to subvert expectations of. I mean, this is what you can do, what you can see in comics that I feel like no other medium can do, even those that are trying to cross these characters over into other mediums like video games and movies and, TV shows. Maybe they could pull this off, like I said, but man, I just felt alive. I was like, this freaking is why I love comic books. So the white ring, absolutely, for this week on the strength of this last 2 pages of Nightwing alone. Anyway, I think those are all of my thoughts on comic books for now. As always, I would love to get your thoughts and reactions to the comics I've talked about here, maybe some comics I didn't talk about, what's got you interested, or what's got you a little bit turned off from what DC is doing, or anything in between there that you want to mention in the comments. I'd love to interact with you about those things. And then, as always, I hope you'll check out christiangeekcentral.com. We've got a podcast there for you and tons more content as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.